He was called many names before one face emerged. The East Area Rapist, the original Night Stalker. For decades, investigators asked one question. How did a serial predator strike repeatedly, vanish nightly, and leave police reacting late, misdirected, and strangely confident they were close each time every single investigation cycle?
Police promise closure, but faster than transparency, faster than accountability, leaving investigators and contradictions untapped.
In 2018, authorities said science ended the mystery. An arrest followed. Joseph James DeAngelo, they declared, was finally responsible. Yet critics noticed how relief replaced scrutiny immediately, how unanswered questions faded, and how a 40-year failure suddenly became a success story without cross-examination by global media, institutions, officials, politicians, unquestioned. Before labels, there were routines. Couples slept, windows stayed cracked, doors unlocked against summer heat. Survivors later described whispered threats and stacked dishes. Details police recorded clinically. What troubled critics was not brutality, but precision, timing, and knowledge suggesting someone who understood response patterns intimately long before attacks ended.
Behavior suggested preparation, not improvisation. Yet that
Officially, investigators said the offender learned by trial and error. Quietly, some asked why mistakes seemed absent, why patrol schedules were anticipated, why escapes felt rehearsed. Those questions rarely surfaced publicly because acknowledging them meant confronting uncomfortable possibilities within institutions meant to protect communities, families, reputations, authority, careers, budgets, legitimacy. Police stitched crimes into a statewide timeline, claiming escalation explained everything. Critics noticed pauses aligning with job changes, relocations, and life events. Instead of clarifying the mystery, the timeline raised another question. Was the killer evolving, or simply constrained by circumstances investigators overlooked while pursuing theories already publicly accepted?
Timelines offered order, but also concealed inconvenient overlaps, raising suspicion that structure replaced inquiry.
Maps showed clusters, patrol zones overlapped. Yet geographic profiling debates stayed internal. When discrepancies surfaced, officials emphasized certainty, not uncertainty. The public heard progress. Investigators felt pressure. Doubt was treated as delay, not diligence. In a hunt desperate for resolution after decades of fear, criticism, failure, embarrassment, lawsuits, scrutiny, exposure. From the beginning, police searched for outsiders, burglars, drifters, known offenders. The idea of a law enforcement connection surfaced occasionally, then vanished. Critics later asked why access, training, and institutional familiarity were treated as coincidences rather than investigative leads deserving sustained scrutiny despite mounting patterns, survivor accounts, timing advantages, proximity, authority.
Rejecting uncomfortable theories, protect institutions, but narrow vision allow critical possibility to fade while the offender remains.
Such possibilities threatened trust. Accepting them meant examining internal failures, not just external evil. Official statements minimized the angle, calling it speculative. Years later, when Joseph James DeAngelo's background emerged, the omission felt less cautious and more convenient to agencies. Supervisors, commanders, departments, unions, reputations, pensions, careers, leadership, oversight, credibility. When the arrest came, celebration dominated coverage. Joseph James DeAngelo appeared frail, silent, defeated. Past complaints from neighbors resurfaced, now framed as warning signs. Critics questioned timing. Why behaviors ignored for decades suddenly carried meaning only after handcuffs confirmed a suspect already validated, announced, televised, accepted, repeated, amplified, normalized, unquestioned.
Closure satisfied emotion, yet foreclosed examination, leaving unresolved whether certainty emerged from proof or
Media certainty replaced investigation. The guilty plea eliminated trials, cross-examination, and competing narratives. Survivors deserved peace, officials said. But critics asked whether justice without testing evidence risks transforming relief into obedience. Where agreement substitutes for understanding across audiences, institutions, jurisdictions, generations, archives, classrooms, headlines, documentaries, textbooks, podcasts, panels, conferences, histories. Authorities framed genetic genealogy as revolutionary. A distant relative, a public database, a family tree narrowing inward. Headlines suggested inevitability. Yet experts note DNA did not identify Joseph James DeAngelo alone. Investigators still chose which branches mattered, which names deserved attention. And when probability became certainty without external challenge or independent review.
DNA guided investigators, but investigators guided DNAs, meaning a nuance rarely explained when certainty became the headline.
Critics argue the process was selective, not automatic. Decisions shaped outcomes. DNA narrowed possibilities, but human judgment closed the circle. That distinction matters because errors don't disappear when technology assists them. They accelerate, and once an arrest occurs, reinterpretation of evidence begins. Aligning memories, statements, assumptions toward confirmation rather than continued questioning. Joseph James DeAngelo pleaded guilty. No jury weighed evidence, no defense cross-examined methods. The state presented a narrative uninterrupted. Supporters saw mercy for survivors. Critics saw missed accountability. Trials expose weakness. Please conceal it. Without confrontation, investigative decisions remained assumptions, not conclusions proven under pressure, skepticism, or adversarial scrutiny required in controversial historic cases.
A guilty plea delivered peace, but removed the mechanism designed to test truth under pressure.
Legal finality arrived without forensic debate. Alternative suspects stayed hypothetical. Early investigative errors stayed unchallenged. Appeals became impossible. Closure came quickly, but at a cost. The public never saw how evidence survived challenge, because challenge never occurred. Confidence replaced verification, a dangerous exchange when precedent and policy follow unresolved assumptions unquestioned, unrecorded, uncorrected. Media coverage shifted instantly from investigation to celebration. The story became technological triumph. Few outlets revisited decades of missteps. Few questioned why leads stalled. The narrative simplified failure into patience rewarded, rather than sustained errors overlooked. Viewers were told resolution meant correctness, not merely finality, reinforcing trust without examination of institutional accountability or investigative transparency.
Media certainty discouraged inquiry, transforming investigation into mythology, where questions became unwelcome distractions rather.
Dissenting experts struggled for airtime. Skepticism sounded insensitive. Questioning felt disloyal to victims. Media pressure framed doubt as obstruction. As repetition hardened narrative, curiosity disappeared. The case moved from investigation to legend, where complexity threatened storytelling efficiency and unresolved contradictions risk undermining a feel-good ending. Audiences were encouraged to accept without discomfort. Some criminologists still dispute single offender certainty. Crime scene variations, behavioral shifts, cooling off periods. These inconsistencies rarely reached public discussion. Officials dismissed them as resolved. Critics argue unresolved does not mean incorrect. It means unexplored. When consensus forms too quickly, dissent becomes evidence of denial rather than a tool for refining truth and protecting future investigations.
Disagreement survived conviction, reminding observers that closure for courts doesn't guarantee consensus among experts.
Archived reports remain sealed. Requests for complete transparency face resistance. Agencies insist nothing remains unanswered. Yet refusal fuels suspicion. If evidence is strong, scrutiny strengthens legitimacy. If scrutiny is avoided, doubt persists. Silence doesn't end debate. It preserves it, quietly. Among professionals who understand how certainty can mask vulnerability within systems tasked with justice. Joseph James DeAngelo is imprisoned. Victims were heard. Sentences were delivered. Officially, the story ended. But historically, this case still provokes discomfort because certainty arrived where scrutiny should have deepened. Justice was declared, yet examination stopped, leaving future investigators learning outcomes without fully understanding the process that produced them.
The case closes legally, but intellectually remains open, challenging whether truth was proven or merely accepted.
If DNA can solve crimes, it can also shield flawed decisions from exposure. The lasting question isn't whether Joseph James DeAngelo committed crimes. It's whether the investigation that identified him can withstand the same scrutiny once demanded of suspects. And if it can't, what precedent has quietly been set? Before Joseph James DeAngelo, dozens of suspects surfaced. Some were questioned aggressively, others briefly, then forgotten. Files show promising leads sidelined after circumstantial conflicts. Critics ask whether elimination standards shifted over time. depending on workload, leadership, or narrative convenience, rather than consistent evidentiary thresholds applied equally throughout the decades-long investigation.
Discarded suspects reveal how investigative momentum can harden early judgments into permanent conclusions without later verification.
Several suspects were cleared without DNA comparison because technology wasn't available yet. When it later existed, many names weren't revisited. Investigators focused forward, not backward. That decision saved resources but raised concerns. If earlier assumptions were flawed, how many exclusions rested on confidence rather than proof? Official maps show one offender covering vast territory efficiently. Critics argue the distances strain plausibility without law enforcement mobility. Response time knowledge, jurisdiction hopping, and escape routes suggest access beyond civilian norms. These inconsistencies were acknowledged internally, but rarely discussed publicly, as doing so complicated the simple narrative of a lone predator evolving organically.
Geography challenged certainty, yet complexity was streamlined for public reassurance rather than explored fully.
Geographic profiling experts disagree on whether patterns truly align. Some see multiple operational bases. Others see forced connections. The public heard certainty. Investigators debated probability. When disagreement persists among specialists, closure feels premature, raising questions about whether conclusions followed evidence or evidence followed a desired conclusion shaped by institutional fatigue. Survivors described accents, height, mannerisms, even odors. These details conflicted across cases. Early investigators treated inconsistencies as human error. After arrest, those same contradictions were reframed as disguise or stress response. Critics question whether survivor memories were evaluated objectively or reshaped to fit Joseph James DeAngelo once identification occurred.
Changing interpretation of testimony highlights how conclusions can influence memory evaluation, not just evidence weighting.
Memory is fragile under trauma. Experts warn against retrofitting testimony, yet post-arrest interpretations leaned heavily on alignment. Statements once dismissed gained importance. This shift raises concern. Were survivor voices guiding investigation, or being selectively elevated to reinforce a narrative already decided? After the arrest, agencies expressed collective relief. Press conferences emphasized perseverance. Rarely mentioned were decades of missed opportunities. Critics argue relief discouraged reflection. Admitting systemic failure risked lawsuits, reputational damage, and public distrust. Celebrating closure proved safer than reopening wounds tied to oversight, bias, and tunnel vision embedded within past investigative cultures.
Relief silenced reflection, trading accountability for reassurance at the moment scrutiny mattered most.
Internal reviews were limited. Few independent audits followed. Officials said lessons were learned, but documentation remained scarce. Without transparency, reform claims feel performative. Observers warn that unexamined success can institutionalize the same vulnerabilities that allowed a predator to operate undetected while investigations appeared active yet directionless. This case endures because it represents more than a killer. It exposes how narratives form, solidify, and resist challenge. Joseph James DeAngelo's conviction answered one question decisively. It left many others suspended, about methods, safeguards, and whether truth benefits more from certainty or sustained skepticism when power declares resolution.
The case persists because it tests whether justice systems value closure over continuous self-examination.
History shows some closed cases reopen under scrutiny, others never do. The Golden State Killer investigation sits between relief and unease. Its legacy depends not on verdicts alone, but on whether future investigators are encouraged to question triumphs as rigorously as failures. Because Joseph James DeAngelo pleaded guilty, appeals became irrelevant. No higher court reviewed investigative conduct. No evidence faced exclusion hearings. For critics, this removed a critical safeguard. Appeals don't just challenge guilt, they test procedures. Without them, questionable methods remain unexamined, preserved as acceptable precedent for future cases built on similar technological confidence. Legal scholars note that finality without review creates blind spots. Courts never ruled on genealogy boundaries, data handling, or suspect narrowing standards. What entered record unchallenged now guides practice nationwide. The case shaped law quietly, not through debate, but through silence, a powerful force when institutional habits form faster than regulation or oversight. Genetic genealogy expanded rapidly after this case. Agencies adopted it confidently. Critics argue policy lagged behind practice. Consent, privacy, and error thresholds remain unsettled. The public associates technology with objectivity, but technology reflects human choice. When those choices aren't reviewed, power shifts silently from courts to algorithms guided by investigators' assumptions. Supporters say results justify expansion. Skeptics warn success stories obscure near misses and unreported exclusions. Without transparency, failures vanish. DeAngelo's case became proof of concept, not proof of process. That distinction matters when future suspects lack resources, publicity, or scrutiny to question how certainty was constructed using tools few fully understand. Public memory simplified the case. Monster found, nightmare ended. Records tell a messier story of stalled leads, internal disagreement, and evolving theory. Over time, repetition replaced detail. Documentaries echoed press releases. Complexity eroded. The difference between remembrance and record widened, leaving future audiences inheriting certainty without context. Historians warn this gap matters. When simplified memory dominates, institutions avoid learning. Errors fade, patterns repeat. DeAngelo's crimes ended long ago, but the investigative habits surrounding his identification continue shaping policing narratives. Success celebrated, uncertainty minimized, accountability deferred in favor of comforting conclusions. Critics aren't asking whether Joseph James DeAngelo committed crimes. They ask whether investigators followed evidence or guided it, whether exclusions were fair, whether technology confirmed suspicion or replaced it. These questions persist because answers remain undocumented, not disproven, leaving professionals uneasy about what lessons are truly learned.
The debate survives because methodology, not guilt, remains shielded from full examination.
Silence invites speculation. Transparency invites trust. Authorities chose closure. Critics chose inquiry. Both coexist uncomfortably. Until methods are fully exposed, debate remains alive, not as conspiracy, but as professional disagreement over standards that now govern countless investigations beyond this single infamous case. The Golden State Killer case closed legally, but not intellectually. Joseph James DeAngelo's conviction delivered certainty. The process delivered precedent. Whether that precedent strengthens justice or weakens scrutiny remains unanswered, because scrutiny ended when relief began, and relief was mistaken for resolution. If future cases rely on the same shortcuts, will errors be caught or concealed? If technology accelerates conclusions, who slows them down? The lasting mystery isn't who committed these crimes. It's whether truth was tested as rigorously as fear demanded, or simply accepted when exhaustion outweighed doubt.